Hey, welcome everyone to the From the Shadows podcast. I am your host, Shane Grove. And I just want to remind everybody before we start the show, if you want to get a hold of us, you can find us at the From the Shadows podcast Facebook page. You can find our forum page at After the Shadows on Facebook. You can find me at Shane Grove Author on Instagram. You can find us at the From the Shadows podcast Instagram page, or the good old fashioned www.fromtheshadowspodcast.com. Go to the contact button, send me an email. I promise I'll read it. I promise I'll get back to you. Especially if you've got some experiences that you want to share, we'd love to hear them. And if you want to come on the show, we'll have you on the show because that's what everybody wants to hear is your experiences. And we do feel we get feedback we get that a lot of people feel comfortable then sharing their stories because here are the people just like you tell what they want. So it kind of helps the community um, feel a little more inclusive, when people hear something that is similar to their experience, whether it's Bigfoot, UFO, or like today's guest, who I'm going to tell you right now, I knew this guy a little bit, but talking to him before, I didn't even know the can of worms that we're going to get into. And I think everybody's going to enjoy hearing the backstory about our today's guest. So let's welcome Weston Brownlee to the From the Shadows podcast. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. I'm excited to be here with you. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So Weston, so we originally connected on Instagram, and for people that don't follow you on Instagram, I encourage everybody right now, stop the podcast, go find Weston's page, and just scroll through all the really cool thing, like the little creatures. Like I'll let him describe them so I don't make it sound not as impressive as what they are, but describe to people what they're going to see when they go to your Instagram page.
Yeah, so basically, I've had the good fortune of becoming a professional weirdo, which means I'm an artist. And I have my own collection of work that I do independently. And then I also work with the film industry here in New Mexico. So in my own work, the collection of pieces I do that I'm most well known for, if I could say that, I think I can at this point, is called Fey Folk. And they're resin collectibles that are hand painted, and they're all my take on traditional Scottish, English, and Irish fairies. My family is Scottish. We are really in touch with our roots back into like even the 1300s. And so that's a big part of my identity today. So I do art that comes from that, and that's what these pieces are. And then with film, I'm involved in props. I'm involved in creature effects. I've been on crews, of course, but then do a lot of work basically as a vendor where productions are coming to me to have me manufacture, design, and fabricate. But yeah, so I'd say that's the fast and hard version of what I do.
So like I'm looking, and you got like a Mothman. It's called a water horse, but it's what we would think of as like maybe what they call the Loch Ness Monster.
Oh, exactly. It's absolutely the Loch Ness Monster.
And then you have this one thing. This thing is crazy. I don't know how big this is, but it's the giant salamander.
Yes. So
now explain that one to me and what you did that for. Because if I saw that, I would probably turn and run.
That one's a lot of fun. So that's actually on permanent display at the International Cryptozoology Museum, which is owned and run by Lauren Coleman, whom I've heard mentioned a few times on the show, as I've been binge listened the past week or so. But yeah, so he commissioned that piece, and that's one I did in bronze, and it's now there on display. And that's the Trinity Alps giant salamander. So that's a cryptid, if you're not familiar, that's allegedly in California. I believe sightings dated back to the 30s through the 50s. I don't recall exactly, but essentially just a giant salamander in North America and the USA. Very similar in description to the giant salamanders in China and Japan, which of course, those are real. They're all over, if you go look for them. And photos, that is, they're endangered. But the Trinity Alps giant salamander essentially seems like it was one of those that was in California. However, to my knowledge, there's not been any conclusive evidence ever discovered that it was really there. But there's also not conclusive evidence that it wasn't.
Well, it looks like if anybody saw it, it probably ate them. And therefore, there was no witness left to, I mean, like, that would be very alarming to see something. And I don't even know. I mean, from the picture, it probably looks bigger than what it is, but it looks like it's pretty good size.
It's 6 feet. The sculpture is 6 feet,
Holy
which in the accounts, the largest sightings were allegedly about that. Yeah, and of course the Japanese and Chinese giant salamanders can get up to that. And I've not read about them really going after a person, but I believe they are something that they're kind of a little bit like a crocodilian, where they'll bite at something, but they don't eat people the way that a crocodile might.
Right. That sounds like the same people that tell me their dogs don't bite on the mail route. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe anything.
I can neither confirm nor deny, but yeah, I totally know what you're saying.
So I mean, and that's really cool. Like, now, the stuff that you produce for the movies, is it more solid pieces that aren't animated at all, don't move, or do you make some pieces that have a function to them?
It's both. And I'm in a little bit of a unique position because what I do is not 100% props and it's not 100% special effects. I've done some animatronic pieces, nothing too elaborate yet that's been in a production, but that is a capability I have. And then with the animals, a lot of times it's dead animals currently is what people want, or kind of like gag animals. Like, so, somebody's catching a fish, you can't have a real fish for that. I'll make the fake fish that's on the line, right? Those kinds of things. However, it can be even weirder than all that. Like in Dead for a Dollar, which was the movie I was property master on, I mentioned to you, we had a scene with a bunch of cockroaches, and we actually had real cockroaches for this scene where we had to come in with, animal welfare. We had to have people that were actually wranglers for cockroaches and handlers for the cockroaches. But then there was a scene where they get shot and they pop. So I had to have fake cockroaches that can like blow up, basically. So it's all kinds of stuff.
Now I have a lot of questions about the whole cockroach. Let's protect the cockroach thing, because there's whole industries of let's exterminate the cockroach. Right. And I got to be honest, I get like road cockroaches and stuff in boxes in the mail because I think people feed those to reptiles. Like, I think
absolutely.
So it is. I gotta say, that's kind of funny that there's somebody there making sure that the cockroaches are very well taken care of on set. Like, imagine cockroach sitting and like smoking in between sets. Like, that was a tough one, Jeez.
Right.
Good grief. Wow.
They didn't get pampered quite that much, but nearly. And it's really funny. There was a husband and wife team that were the handlers for them on set, and they're friends of mine. I know them really well. That's actually why it came to pass, because we were sitting in the production office at one point getting ready, planning the scene out, and the people I was with, well, where on earth are we going to find people to do this? And I was like, I know some people. And when they were on set, the funniest thing that they told me they had someone say to them was, you are so normal looking. We imagine just not what you are for people that were going to come be the cockroach handlers on set.
Well, I can't like you'd imagine, like I'd imagine like Stephen King, like somebody looked like Stephen King maybe showing up and like opening up his lunchbox, and then there's just the cockroach, something like that. Now,
That's funny.
it's cool. Okay, so as cool as this stuff is, okay,
Yes.
this is not why you are on the show. Okay, even though it certainly all this stuff would be justifiably podcast worthy, but you sent me much the same way I was asking people at the beginning of the show if you have some experiences.
Right.
You sent me some great stories that I think were worthy to have you on to share with our guests. And what really, and now that I've learned some of this other stuff about you, and the fact that you are in the movie industry and in the prop industry, and you understand a little bit about, I don't want to say fakery, but what is, if somebody's trying to pull something, or if
you can say fakery. That is part of what I
Okay.
do, is fake people out
Okay.
professionally with this.
So-
Right? Yeah, it has to look
yeah,
real.
and we
Right,
and, and we were talking about Phil, the producer, and he's doing movies and stuff, and he does a lot of stuff with effects, and so those guys, such yourself, Phil goes over any video somebody sends with a fine tooth comb,
right.
and
yeah.
very few pass past mustard for him, because it's like, I think you could do that. Not saying that it's obviously, but it's also, it's one of those where you could fake that if you really wanted to. So
It's funny. I'm the same way. I sit and when I'm up late at night for whatever reason with nothing to do, I'll watch paranormal videos, and I'm always, the camera angle here. If you wanted to fake that, here's how you do it. And here's that. Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
It's interesting. That's it. So I know when Phil sends me something, it's like worth watching, and that's why I don't sit up and watch those videos, because every single one to me looks like it could be real, or it all looks like they could be fake. So I would like you to go into some of these stories that you have from your youth and even before, because your family has a very interesting background in many cases. And let's get into some of the paranormal stuff that we're here to talk about. I'd love to hear.
Let's do it. So I'll start with my grandfather, because even though these stories aren't mine, they absolutely influenced my thought process on the paranormal, the supernatural. So my grandfather was a nuclear physicist and an astronomer. And he was one of the scientists that was very involved with nuclear testing during the Cold War. And as I mentioned to you a moment ago, he was actually the scientist credited with taking all that testing underground, which is, it's a whole other podcast in itself too. But point being, the first ghost story I heard was from him. And this was puzzling because this is a scientist, right? But the story he told was that he had gone to England and was staying in a castle over there. And of course, the front of the castle was haunted by the Grey Lady, as most English castles seem to be. And the back of the castle was haunted by the Drummer Boy, as most English castles seem to be. And he was staying in the back part of the castle with the Drummer Boy. Well, according to him, he woke up at about 2 a.m. or so and was looking at his pants that had been laid out on a table. He had his clothes for the next day laid out on the table. And he said something just didn't seem right. And as he was looking, his pants flew off the table. And my grandfather, as the scientist, this is curious. This is strange. What is going on here? And he picks his pants up and he puts them back on the table. And he sits there a moment more, and it happens again. And from there, I was young enough when I heard this. I don't really remember the resolution of that specific story, other than that my grandpa was like, this is fascinating that this is happening. But the story then goes that when he came back home to Los Alamos, stuff started happening in the house. They would hear footsteps that would go up the stairs and down the hall. There was one night my dad claims that I don't want to say claims, his story was, because I believe that this happened. He woke up late at night. His dog was on the bed freaking out, all scared, and his door shook like someone was trying to come in. And then he heard the footsteps. And almost everyone in my dad's family, so my dad, his sisters, his brother, my grandpa, had stories that were like this. My grandma never did because she's told my grandfather, if I ever hear anything, we're moving. And she never did. So that quickly encapsulates these kind of stories that existed in my family that I think I would say made me accept the supernatural as just a possible condition of the world in which we live, right? Whatever it is.
Um, it sounds very similar. In fact, that Christy tells me constantly, if you keep talking about ghosts in the office and they stick around, like, I'm not sure how that's supposed to happen. It's one thing to go to
Right.
England and bring a ghost back with you. I'm not sure how they're supposed to like come through the microphone, but whatever. Same thing. We're moving.
Yeah, oh, totally.
We're moving. So, um, so now, did your grandpa think that it was supernatural paranormal stuff, or did he, because he was a scientist, have maybe like there's got to be a really rational
This is
explanation?
what's so fun, I think, about him. Whatever, I have thoughts, and this is a whole other podcast episode too, because he was very, I don't know what kind of research he did, if he did any in this vein, but time travel was always a very big topic for him. He was even someone that had some interest in the idea of multiple universe theory. Um, so whatever he really thought, whether he thought this is the spirit of a dead person or there's some other explanation, it is happening within our physical universe, and no matter what it is, it's real. If it's the spirit of a dead person, the fact that this is happening, there's still something scientific going on. If it's something totally, let's just say, like the label we always try to apply to this, logical or grounded in the reality we think we understand, it's still happening in the physical universe. Whatever it is, it's real in that regard. It's a phenomenon that can be quantified somehow.
That is kind of amazing that your grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
as kind of a cutting edge scientist, because what he was
Mm-hmm.
doing, really was working in stuff that can change the world. Okay,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
in fact change the universe.
Yes.
In a matter of speaking, for
Hmm.
him to have thoughts about you know time travel. So I
Hmm.
mean, would you get? And I think they believe mathematically time travel is possible.
Oh, and I really can't say authoritatively because I'm not a mathematician or a physicist, but in what I know, yeah, I think so. Time, you're right, width, height, and depth are the dimensions that we perceive all the time, and I think that's mostly what we're aware of is space, right?
Hmm.
The space around us. Well, time is a dimension mathematically. That's pretty accepted anymore. We don't really think about that very often. And then there's theoretically as many as 10 dimensions. Whatever that means, I think outside of math, it's hard to conceptualize what we're really talking about there. But I'll go ahead and say the spiritual would absolutely play a part in all that if we're observing it because it's still happening in the universe that we live in, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Oh boy.
Mhm.
Then where do the aliens come into place? What?
Maybe so, right?
And that's kind of what I've wondered if he had any thoughts on that subject
He
as
did.
well. Oh, he
He
did.
did. Oh yeah, time travel. There was one time, see, and I don't know if I should say this on a podcast, but I'm going to.
All
The
right.
only time I ever think he told me something real, like real is in the sense of like maybe I really shouldn't know this and be hearing this, but I am. He told me about something that took place where I believe it was observatories around the world within a certain area observed a phenomenon at the same time. And he said, all we really knew for sure is what we'd observed did not originate on this earth. And I'm immediately thinking, aliens, 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 right? Grandpa, aliens. And he had this grin. He would do this very particular grin. He grinned and kind of shook his head and said, time travel. So he and I kind of read about this some now as there's more coming out about the Pentagon and their what is I forget the designation, but the UFO stuff, right? As the more that people are saying about that, I have seen a few individuals in articles. I don't know, whether it was reports or whatever. I don't recall now, but sort of floating this idea. Hey, what if it's us from the future? What if it is us from the
Exactly.
future? And he, I do think, is someone that ascribed to that idea.
Wow.
Hmm.
That would be amazing. I mean, it's hard to go down. It's hard to really wrap your head around as somebody who, like you said, when you're looking at it mathematical, you can kind of at least keep it in a box,
Yeah,
okay, somewhat in a
right.
box that you can accept. But when you really start to think of it abstractly, that
Hmm.
all the thread just keeps like everything that would mean, and
Oh,
that and then
absolutely.
you just want to say, if that is the possibility, then why are they not coming back and saying, would you guys get a hold of yourself? um you know cri- uh, Cryptocurrency is not real, or cryptocurrency,
And I made a little off Dogecoin back when that was kicking, though.
yeah. Wow. See, that's another. See, this is why. I mean, I think I've got four different other podcasts we could do just from this one
Yeah.
episode. So,
Oh, I know, I know.
so okay, so your grandpa and your dad both
Mhm.
believe there's something extra out there, something paranormal
Oh,
happening
absolutely. Yeah.
happening.
Yeah,
S-
absolutely.
So when is the first time that you yourself experience something that seems out of the ordinary?
Yeah. Oh, so this is a good one, as you know, because this is what I told you that it
Oh
really
yeah,
hooked you. I
yes.
think I was about 6 or 7, and it's really interesting having listened to other guests. It does seem like there's a lot of people that sort of seem to have an experience around that time. If there's somebody that are now,
Mhm.
older, further along in life, and still having experiences, or kind of this mindset like me. But yeah, I was about 6 or 7, and my family has a cabin in the Rocky Mountains. And it's in an area where the community is pretty old, at least for this part of the country and the United States. There were white Europeans in that area in about 1850, I believe. And then this community was founded at about 1896, 1897. And the cabins there now, it's a designated historical site, location, town. So they're all original, or at least updated versions of the original cabins, right? And it's in an area where it's a big valley that kind of abuts right to the national park. So it's not super, super remote, but remote enough. Like you can get to things fairly quickly in the area, but once you're there, if you're just hanging out, there's wilderness everywhere, and it's the Rockies. So there's this place me and my cousins would always go like explore, right? Called Big Rock. It's this granite formation that was maybe half a mile from our cabin. And it's off away from the community, where you're off in the woods, you're up in the mountains. It's all the mountains, but you know what I mean. You're away from
Mhm.
civilization the further you
Yeah.
go. And we're up there one day, and we're looking out across the valley towards the area of the national park where it's the dense forest, and it kind of goes up a ridge up to the mountains where you've even got like the peaks above tree line there. And we're looking off that way, and we see what we think is the roof of this old abandoned cabin. And it's in a spot away from everything. It's not near anything. And we're like, it's something we've never noticed before. So my oldest cousin's like, we're going to go find it. And of course, he's the oldest cousin. We were going to go find it. That's exactly what was going to happen at that point. So we did. We start hiking. And I don't think I probably accurately remember how far we went, but it feels like we went about a mile. It took a while. We were winding through the woods and thinking, yeah, we think we're going the right way. And we come to this place where we're basically at a ridge, at the bottom of a ridge that kind of goes up a little bit and tapers off, and it looks like there's a meadow up there. And when we're right there, we hear this scream, and I've never heard anything like it since. It was just unearthly, shrill, high pitched, terrifying sound. Just this unearthly scream that just stops us all in our tracks. And we stand there for a minute. And then my oldest cousin's like, let's go, let's keep going. And all right, with the oldest cousin, we're going to keep going. So we do. We go up the ridge to the top of the hill there. And sure enough, yep, it opens up into a clearing. And right out there in the clearing, there's this cabin. And it's this dilapidated, old-looking cabin. It looks like it's not been inhabited in ages. It doesn't look like there's anyone around. There's nothing modern present, and it's it's not at a point where like it's truly a ruin that looks like it's about to collapse on itself, but it definitely looks like it's been there a long time and nobody's been to it. And so we're standing there looking at it, and my oldest cousin's like, "All right, let's go in, let's go check it out." And right as we're taking some steps toward it, we hear this scream again, and it really sounds like it's inside the cabin this time. And just again, this piercing, unearthly scream. It's difficult to describe. And we booked it. We were done at that point. We turned around and just ran. I did track in high school, but I sprinted. And this is the only time in my life I did distance very well. We had to have run at least a mile before we stopped. And once we stopped, caught our breath, and we're like, "Oh, that was weird. That was weird." But you're 6 or 7. I don't think the reality of something like that is really going to settle the same way that if that happened to me now. And so we go back to our cabin, hang out. Well, the next day, my oldest cousin "Let's go look for that cabin again." And all right, let's go do it. So we go do it. The frontal lobe was a long ways off from developed at that point.
Say, so this cousin sounds like the worst guy ever. I just gotta say that. But how much older was he than you?
Man, what is he? He's 5 years older, 4.5, 5. So if I was 7, he'd have been like 11, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there.
Is he still? I'm assuming he's still alive.
Yes, he is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And have you ever talked to him? Do you guys talk about this?
Yes.
And he remembers he remembers the same.
Yes, it's been a long time since we've talked about this. Him and one other cousin who's 2 years older than me. And it's one of those things in my mind that I'm like, this has to be a fabricated memory. I was young enough. This is so out there. I have to not be remembering the details correctly. And when I've talked to them about it, they're like, "No, that's what we remember as well." And then where it gets even weirder from where we left off there, mm-hmm. That next day when we go back to look for it, we're back up on Big Rock again, and we look out across, and there's the roof. So we go, meander through the woods. Well, something isn't right. We should be there. What's going on? We're in the same area. This looks right. Again, we weren't masters of cartography and navigation at that point, but it feels like we should be about where we had been. No cabin. All right, well, we go back to Big Rock, get up on top and look. No, there's the roof. So we try one more time. We go out and look for it. Can't find it anywhere. So we give up and we go back to Big Rock. And this time we get up to the top looking out where it should be. There's no roof. There's no sign of the cabin anywhere. And I won't say to this day, because I haven't gone and looked for this, in the last 10 years, but in any time since that we ever looked for this cabin or ever tried to spot it, there's no trace of it at all.
So, so what on earth? You're obviously a very analytical guy.
Yes.
So in your thinking about this, what do you suppose you guys were witnessing at the time?
I don't know. The furthest I've gotten with that is that I have, since somebody even pointed this out to me at one point, well, mountain lions can make a really freaky sound that's kind of like a scream. And I've listened to that, and there's elements of it that could compare. It's the closest comparison I've ever heard, but it's still not what it was. That's the furthest I've gotten with analyzing what I think happened. I have no idea.
Now that's one thing, but I don't know any mountain lion that's made a cabin disappear.
Right. That's the whole. And again, since 2 other people witnessed it and recall it pretty much the same way I do, I don't know what that's all about. And that's where it's interesting to think, like kind of talking a minute ago. Well, time did time get all funky there? As you get into some of the crazier stuff in quantum physics and some of the things they're starting to prove and see with even things like gravitational waves, black holes, the fabric of the universe, I think, can get screwed up in ways that we have no ability to conceptualize very well at the moment. Maybe it was something like that. Maybe that is a cabin that was there at one point, and maybe we were witnessing a phenomenon that was very scientific, if nothing else. The screen doesn't really seem to factor into that. But I don't know. There is this idea with hauntings, of course, as I'm sure you're familiar, people talk about, that are like residual, right? Like an imprint on time itself. Maybe it was something like that. But I really don't know what that was all about. And then I've got one more for you. That's my surprise story that's attached to this in the topic of disappearing things in this area. So the other weird one up here, because the other thing we'd do is we'd follow this creek or this stream that ran up the mountain, and not really the game, but the objective was always to see how far could we go. Could we ever make it to the headwaters? Because supposedly it was a spring up on the side of the mountain. Well, we never made it to the headwaters, but there was one time we're going up this creek, and I look as we're hiking along, and I see this cave off on the side. So if you're following the stream, I think it ran north-south. So off on the east side of this. And it didn't seem bizarre. It was just this cave that was up on the side of this hill. And the way I remember, there were even like people that were like picnicking around it, right? This is what it looked like to me. They were hanging out, but it wasn't like they were doing anything with the cave. They were just in the vicinity of it. And I love caves. Caves are a lot of fun, and I go caving when I can, which isn't often anymore. But you're not a fan of caves?
Nothing about that sounds fun.
I've done one once where now this is again where my frontal lobe is there now. I'd never do this now, but there was one time when I was a teenager, we were caving, and it was one of those like little tiny holes that you have to like breathe the air out of your chest to get through, and kind of put your hands up above your head. I've done that.
I know exactly. I know exactly. In the Daniel Boone National Forest. Now, I hate camping. Oh, God, we're going so far left of center here. But I hate camp. I do not enjoy camping, especially not in the tent or anything like that.
Sure.
Nothing about that is appealing to me. And my ex-brother-in-law was literally 135 pounds, 6 foot tall, 135 pounds, if that. And he loved to hike and stuff. And so he took us into this cave system, like it was a cave. And he goes, now there's going to be some spot. And it was me and my wife at the time, her sister and him. Yeah. And he goes, there's going to be some spots where it's going to get a little tight. And I'm thinking, dude, I'm at this time, about 240. Okay. 6'2", 240. He's 5'11", 135. And I'm like, you're telling me it's going to be tight. You don't have any idea what it's going to be for me. And I just remember getting in some spots where you're literally turning sideways and then having to lift yourself up and crawl through a spot. And I remember when at one point as I'm going sideways and there's rocks, in between me, I'm thinking if there's an earth, like just a even remote tremor.
Oh no. Yeah.
I'm done. And nobody's ever coming to get me. This is my tomb. And, and that's it. And they may never figure out that this is where I'm at. And now knowing as much as I do about my ex-wife, I think maybe that she probably wouldn't have told anybody where I was at.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So let's get back on to the cave.
Fortune favored you. And in this case, we didn't shimmy into this. It was just off on the side. I saw it. I wanted to go check it out. My oldest cousin's like, no, we're going to keep going. So we keep going. And then later, finally, when we decide, as in he decided, we're not going to find the headwaters of this creek today. All right, Weston, let's go check out your cave. So we come back and we're about to the area it should be. Well, there's no cave. That's the moral of this story again. No cave. The cave is just gone. And this is one I will say to this day, as in the last time I've been there and gone up this stream looking for this cave, there's no trace of it. And here's what everyone should understand here in this story. This stream is a straight shot. There's nothing but a line that the water makes, right? There's no offshoots. There's no other tributaries. There's nothing feeding into this creek. It has one source for its headwaters, and it's just one little line all the way down to where it finally joins up with other stuff miles and miles away. and the cave is just gone. So this is one of those where, like, yeah, okay, I could believe that there's a world in which we just don't find that cabin and for whatever reason don't see it. But this is, there's no way this should be the case. And this is one I've told my dad, and he said, you know, I think I remember once when I was a kid seeing something like this, like you're saying, up along this stream and never being able to come across it again.
And so this is witnessed by more than just you, right? I mean, your friend, your
Exactly.
cousin, it's all your cousins, same cousins,
Right.
same.
Yeah. They saw it.
And it's in the same area as the cabin.
And I would say this one probably 2 or 3 miles from that, from where we were seeing the cabin. But right, it's the same general vicinity.
So it makes you wonder, like, what is the phenomena that's going on there in that area? And
right,
I mean, you know, they always say, is it limestone?
I believe so, and quartz,
granite, or no, it's granite and quartz, and
right.
water all have different properties to them that kind of have. I mean, I know the whole missing 911 or 911 missing 411 is based on the fact that there's granite fields.
Right.
The stuff. So it makes you wonder. And some of those missing persons cases seem like people just vanished right off the trail.
Oh yeah.
So you wonder, is some of this natural stuff creating like rips in the veil there that people are just
right
walking right,
yeah,
or seeing through one dimension into another.
I wonder, you know, and I love it, and I think that's another thing that I would say I really took from my grandfather. Never mind all of this, the accepted take that we have on the universe, the world in which we experience, all of the science. It should tell us that there's an awful lot that we do not know and understand. And I think it's incredibly presumptuous of people to immediately write things like this off.
And it is amazing how many people do. How many people think, we don't. But a lot of that is grounded in their belief system. And,
absolutely.
And the problem with belief systems is that you are just making leaps of faith many times in trusting a whole system of belief that sometimes isn't founded on a whole lot of facts or a whole lot of physical evidence. And you know, and everybody's guilty of it to a certain degree, you know. But the fact that it's not just you, it's your cousins. They remember it the same way you do, and it's in the same area. It almost makes, you know, the other thing I've heard people talk about is when they see what they believe is a portal, and when they look through the portal, they see landscape. Like they might see what appears to be the sun, or they might see a blue sky, or they might see it. So you almost wonder if these are places where maybe you guys were looking through portals and seeing things. Now that
I wonder, you know,
but it makes me wonder that if you got to the cabin and whatever's in there screaming's like, get out of here, go back to where you came from, and kind of chased you guys back, because maybe
that's interesting.
Enter that cabin, it's see you later, you know.
I mean, maybe so, right? I mean, we know how Stranger Things goes.
Exactly. Holy smokes. I mean, everything about this is a mind-bending beginning, in my book, to a good horror movie. But
absolutely.
But
that's not a digression though, because this is kind of one metric I have for other people, and I'm not someone who's be like, your story is not believable, but is a lot of times, I think, at least in my opinion, the most convincing stories about the paranormal don't really wrap up with any kind of great significance attached. It's just like, yeah, this happened and it was weird and I've got no idea, or I saw this and that was it. I think that's a very interesting metric to gauge stories with, is, well, did this have a really distinct narrative plot that it followed? and did all the little threads weave together to kind of reveal something? Or is it kind of like just someone being like, well, I had an experience and I don't know what to make of it, and there's things about it that don't add up, you know?
I know, and to think that they're very well possibly, you may never come across an explanation as to what happened to that cabin or to that cave.
Right.
And I find that, like, when I listen to other podcasts that do the missing persons,
Oh, sure.
and you're just like, for the families of those people, when it is not apparent that it's foul play or that somebody purposely is just hiding out,
Right.
it's like how agonizing it can be when it comes to that aspect of
Oh,
never
I can't
knowing,
imagine.
of never knowing. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like never knowing if that girl would have said yes if you asked her to the dance in 8th grade.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's a mystery that may never get solved, um and how that could just drive you a little bit, like, it could very easily dictate the rest of the way you lived your
It
life,
could.
trying to
It
figure
could.
out what happened. And
Yeah, which I think is a very interesting idea in and of itself, because, and I'm going to jump back to aliens a little bit here, but like my wife and I were just talking about this the other night, actually. What's so fascinating about this idea of the unknown is there's a point at which aliens are what they are now, right? It's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's Alien. It's what the fourth kind. All these things where the aliens are like this unknown force, and it's terrifying. And then there's a day and age in which it's Star Wars, right? It's commonplace. Everybody knows what's out
yeah,
there, and we don't
yeah,
care. It's normal. And the proliferation of normality with all of these topics is where all of this lives, I think, because it's like you said, right? If the unknown's either going to drive someone, it's going to define them, or it's going to be someone's able to leave it in this realm of mystery.
yeah. And it would be, and I can see where it could just be impossible to leave it alone. Just leave it alone.
Oh yeah.
So, okay, so let's. By the way, that's one of the greatest. To me, those are two of the greatest, like, little stories when
Oh,
it
cool.
comes to, just because of all the circumstances, and it wasn't just
Yeah.
you. It's a
Right.
shared experience,
Right.
and because wow.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
before we move on, have you
Yes.
have you just told your cousins, okay, at some point we're going back and we're gonna search for
And we're
this
gonna
cabin?
find it.
We're gonna
I've
find.
not. I've not done that. And I don't know if it was because of my age, but I don't think so, because of the number of other stories I have with the ghost stories, the paranormal, that have not driven me in that direction. That need to know doesn't really exist for me. With Cimarron, I've kind of mentioned to you the history. There's some things about the history there that are a little more like that nagging question that won't go away. But as far as what you're asking about with the cabin, not really. Maybe someday, But I think too, the other side of that for me is that maybe it's better to leave it alone. Maybe it's better to let it remain in the unknown. It's like you said, maybe that's that portal we don't want to walk through, and there's demogorgons that are going to eat us. I don't know, but I'm okay not knowing, I think.
So what's the next paranormal event in this lifelong journey that you've been on?
Man, the next one chronologically, it's much smaller, and this is kind of how it goes for me, is that there's really not any other big ghost stories until I'm in college. But the next one I remember was another camping trip, and this didn't happen to me directly, but a guy I was with, we were camping in this old ghost town called Chavano that's in Colorado, and we were backpacking, and we were just camping in this area. And it's funny, and a lot of my ghost stories end up this way, where usually a ghosts are the last thing on my mind, and then something happens. And this was one of those times where I was not thinking about any of this, but this guy came back to camp one night, freaked out. You could tell something had happened to him. And he said he was a big runner. I forget what he did exactly in track, but he was out running because they had a big meet coming up for state or something. And he came back just freaked out. And he said he'd been running, and he went by one of these buildings, and he saw something come out of the building and get into the forest and just start walking back and forth, sizing him up. And he said it looked like a person, but it was just this dark figure. And he booked it. And of course, and most of the people there didn't believe him, but I did, because, we've kind of established why I might be someone that would believe a story like that.
Exactly.
But that was right. Yeah. That was the next one. Oh man. But from here, like I kind of said, I'm going to give you, I guess I'm dealing, because I've got all the stories and you're consuming, you're playing. You player's choice. What do you want next? I've got the farm that's in my family. It's our family farm that goes back to the 1800s. I've got a house that my wife and I stayed at after college that had some crazy, crazy stuff. I've got the apparition in England that multiples of us witnessed, and then the St. James Hotel in Cimarron, New Mexico. That's a whole topic on its own.
Okay, so I want to hear, share the story about the apparition in England.
Yes.
And then I definitely want to hear about the house that you and your wife, because then again, it brings into somebody else into the mix. And that's some
good ones.
Yeah, that's what I find fascinating, is when there's more than just one.
Well, and I do think, I in the England one's this way too. And I feel fortunate that some of these experiences, a lot of them have had multiple people that corroborate it, because, I'm an artist, I write, I know I have a very active imagination. Anytime I've experienced something just by myself, I immediately ask, like, did that really happen? Or is there something going on with me? But so England, we were at Dover, which, if you're not familiar, is right on the coast. And it's where the ferry goes from England to the mainland, to France and Belgium. And man, I'll tell you, I the first time being there, all of British and much of Northern European history suddenly made sense in a way it hadn't before. You can see the skyline of Calais in France. You can see, I believe it's Brussels in Belgium, but one of the cities that's right on the coast. You can see them. And just how close Europe and England are, and the channel, how narrow that really is. It opened an understanding of history for me that I hadn't had before. But so we're at the castle there, and the castle itself is originally Norman, so I believe about the 1000s. But there's even an old Roman lighthouse. So this is an area in England that's been occupied for ages, right?
Yeah.
And the castle, and again, I was not thinking about ghosts. We were there touring the castle, and we went through the castle, and it's very cool. It's all kinds of neat stuff there. And then we realized, as we're about to leave, you can tour the old tunnels. And I didn't know about these before we got there. But there's tunnels that go into the cliffs and down below the castle, and you can tour them. And there's, I don't remember how many, I'm going to be a bad American that'll use anything but the metric system, right? I don't know how many school bus links they actually go down into the cliffs. But I think they run for miles. And if I remember correctly, they've not been completely explored. And it's the sort of thing where there's areas that you really shouldn't go because they're not stable. There's areas you shouldn't go because of gas that's in there. The air is bad. But you can go through a section that was used to stage the British invasion of Belgium during World War II.
Okay.
And so, of course, everything in this section is vintage to the 30s and 40s. And it's one of those places, it's very neat, but there is an eerie feeling simply because you're in a place that was once very inhabited, had a ton of stuff going on, and now there's nothing, there's nobody, and it's pretty dark, and all the stuff is still there. And granted, I don't know what extent they've curated and put things back, or if it was really just like, nope, we're done, let's take off and leave it all. But it's that kind of a place. It's abandoned.
And if you think about, if this is where they staged an attack,
right,
all the energy from all the people that were there, and it's probably negative energy,
Sure. Oh, I think
excitable
so. Yeah.
energy, but all the negative,
Right.
like we're going to go, or we're going to come back, all the stuff these young men had probably already seen,
Hmm.
and that imprint, that psychic energy imprint, that again, it resides there because that energy doesn't go anywhere. It's
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
it's staying
I
there.
totally think that, yeah, there's something to that. I've been to some battlefields in the US that have that same feeling. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely think there's something to that. And it totally had that sort of a feeling to it. And so we go in, we go through the one I'm going to, paint the picture just a little bit here before I get to the ghost. But what really stuck with me the most was the old cafeteria, and particularly, like, again, that kind of feeling like we're talking about. It was pretty dim, you could see, but it wasn't like daylight by any means. um in all the empty tables and chairs, and just kind of the way that this cafeteria stretched back into the shadows and into nothing, and who knew what beyond, right? um, that particular spot in the tunnel stuck with me. But so we're going through, and we're outside the old surgery or operating room, right? For those of us this side the pond. And the tour guide was talking. I have to be honest, I wasn't listening at this point because something else caught my attention. And there was a man that I saw standing down the tunnel, maybe 10 yards. It was not that far. It was far enough that you could tell this person was nowhere near us, had nothing to do with us, but it was near enough you could very clearly see this person. And this was one of those things too. I was on high alert because we're in England and you're with a tour group at a cultural treasure, in their history. Don't wander off. They're even more intense about that kind of thing than we are. So I'm like, oh my God, what? There's somebody that's wandered off. What's happening? And I'm looking at this guy, and then immediately I'm like, something's not right about this. But it's one of those situations where my mind can't make sense of what I'm seeing. And like the cabin and the cave, that wasn't like that. It's a cabin, it's a cave. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, what? Something's not right. Something's not right. And I'm looking, and he's standing kind of looking at a watch like this. So for those of you that can't see, like Shane, he's got his wrist up to his face, and one as the fingers of his opposite hand kind of set against the watch, like he's really checking time, very intent on it. Well, then I realized he's wearing a uniform, and my brain looking for an explanation that makes sense, because I've still not made sense of what I'm seeing. I'm like, this guy's with the cleaning staff or something. I don't know why that's what my mind went to, but it did. Well, it's England. They keep everything very spick and span unless you're in London, right? So he's looking at this watch, and I realize he's in uniform, but something's still not right. Well, then after a moment more, I realized this guy is in RAF uniform, right? Royal Air Force uniform. And then a split second later, I'm like, oh my God, no, this is 40s era, 30s, 40s era RAF uniform. This is World War II era RAF uniform. I should not be seeing what I'm seeing. And then I'm like, was this guy a performer? Like, what on earth? And like, yeah, right, a performer in a tunnel, like off away from a crowd. What on earth? And so then, as I'm having all these realizations about how wrong what I'm looking at should be, this guy drops his hand. He stops looking at his watch. He looks up at the group, and then he takes like 3 or 4 steps toward us. And then he turns left and walks into a solid wall and disappears. And at that point, I'm like, oh my God, I'm hallucinating. There's no way I've just seen what I think I've seen. But then I turn to the rest of the group, and my professor is staring down at that same spot like this, right hand over her mouth. Her eyes are wide as saucers. And I ask her, did you just see that? She says to me, what did you see? So I describe it to her, and she's nodding and she's nodding and nodding. Yeah, I saw exactly the same thing. And then as we kind of got talking with the rest of our group, there were 3 or 4 other people in the group that had seen it also.
That's amazing right there.
Oh, yeah,
Everybody
it
saw it.
was.
But you know what though? Now that you're really describing, and looking at the time and the uniform, you wonder,
Right.
were you witnessing somebody who left on that invasion and didn't come back? And they keep
Maybe, right? Or
like checking the time, like, okay, I gotta go, and
right.
And that's just the moment they go back to, you know what I'm saying?
Or it's like you said, too, or if not that, is there something about our ability to imprint something of ourselves on the physical world around us, that energy attached to everything that went into that invasion and what it left there? Maybe it was residual, right? Maybe we were kind of peering through time at that moment.
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. But I do know that we all saw the same thing. So it's hard to dispute that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Like you said, you yourself can always question what you're seeing, and
Right.
but it's when you get confirmation from other people that they saw the
Exactly.
same thing, and that's when at least you know you're not going crazy, you
Oh,
know.
absolutely. And it's so fascinating too. And this is something kind of and I'm diverging a little, but not just in the topic of corroborating things about the supernatural that are reported. One thing I love. So another area of my background is I majored in English, but emphasized in Victorian Gothic literature and then supernatural folklore. Ghost stories were even kind of a part of my academic pursuits. And one thing that's kind of always been in ghost stories, especially once you start to see them in the Victorian age, is the witching hour, right? That's
Hmm.
typically between 2 and 3 or 3 and 4 in the morning. And in tons of ghost stories I've personally collected from people, when they report when it's happening, if they've looked at a clock, it's between 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, or it's the middle of the night and they think it's 2 and 3 or 3 and 4. And so to like see something like that exists in old bodies of literature that still are being reported, where it's an individual that has no knowledge of that and is not trying to correlate their story with some kind of existing body of literature, I think that adds credibility to the entire notion.
No, I always hear that and stuff, and it always reminds me of one of my buddies and co-writers, Moose Brown, and his Grammy-winning
Mhm.
song "It's 5 o'clock Somewhere." It's always it's always 3 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? It's
It's
always
always 3 a.m. somewhere.
like how did like how did the spirits know that this is the witching hour? And it's
Which
always the
that
same.
begs an interesting question.
It's always the same time.
Hmm.
And I wonder, is it that do we as human beings place that parameter on this, or are how did that come into being,
Well,
and
and I
why
think, oh, go ahead.
and why are these spirits accepting the stuff, the parameters that we put on it? You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? Like,
that's interesting to me. What I have found, because I've asked that same question, is traditionally I believe this goes back to even a lot of old Druidic beliefs, and a lot of like the really old, like, quote, pagan cultures, right? For lack of a better way of character. And I'm a Celt, right? So I'm one of those guys. But um I believe that was the time that it was considered that the veil between like the world
was
of
the
living and the world of the
was the
dead is thinnest, right?
yeah.
Which also then correlates with like Samhain and all the old Celtic holidays. But then that's the time of the year, right? The solstice and all that. But what's interesting though, to counterpoint that, is most of my stories have taken place in the day, like the ghost in the tunnels. That was the middle of the day. The cabin, the middle of the day, the cave, and then some of these other stories we'll get to. A lot of them, I have just as many, if not more, ghost stories in broad daylight as I do at night. But that is
Well,
interesting to me, the notion of nighttime.
that's my point exactly. It's
Hmm.
3 a.m. somewhere, right? So
There you
this
go. The veil is
is
always there.
so did you do any extra research on that place to see if that was a thing that had been reported before? And
I tried to look into it, and I found one account that was somewhat similar. And then I found other accounts that had nothing to do with World War II apparitions. They were all much older. They appear to be like, oh, I don't recall the exact era, the name, but like the 1400s, the early 1400s. But never found exactly another story of someone seeing what looked like an RAF officer.
hmm,
Hmm.
hmm, that's pretty cool. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it was.
So, okay, so let's hear about this haunted house.
Oh, this house. Now, my preface to this one's going to be, like some of these stories I've told, like the apparition, even some I haven't gotten to. There's a lot that just felt like, all right, you can look at a thunderstorm and that can be freaky, but there's nothing bad about it, right? There's nothing negative attached to it. You can see a meteor in the sky and that can startle you, but that's not the same thing as feeling something dark or negative. This house was different. This is the one time in my list of supernatural occurrences where I've been somewhere that I would say it felt wrong, it felt bad. So there was this house in Colorado that me and my wife, and we weren't yet married at the time, but we were both staying there, and then two other friends of ours. We were basically like house sitting for a summer. And there was a family that they were at the top of the house, and they rented the basement to this lady. So didn't really think anything of it, that, right? There's nothing strange about renting a house. Somebody lives in the basement. But so we come in. The first night we were there, they had this dog. And I have to admit, this dog soured me on dogs a little. Don't worry, listeners. I'm still a dog lover, but this dog was a menace. It was like the Beast in The Sandlot. And there was one day where I'd always end up home with the dog, and everyone was like, "We're all going to help take care of the dog for these people." Well, no, it didn't work out that way. I did everything. One day though, he had this cone on because he had just had an operation, so we had to do all this other stuff for him. And the cone on a dog this size that like is not the best listener. He's just a living battering ram. And there was one day that's what happened. He was all excited and ran at something from behind me and hit me in the back of the knees. And I did a backflip and landed and was okay. But he was that kind of dog.
Oh, that just sounds awesome. It just sounds awesome.
Oh, it was my favorite. But the way he comes in to this story immediately, the first night we're there, he freaks out at about 10 at night. And he's sitting in the front of this house looking out the front windows. And this is, I believe he was a pit bull boxer mix. So this is a tough dog, right? This is a breed that's bred for, being a good protective dog. And he's barking at this empty spot on the front lawn, and his hackles are all up. The hair is all standing up. And it was this mean bark. And there was nothing about it. And it was just me and my wife that were there at the time. And we didn't feel threatened by him, but we could tell he was threatened by something, and he was telling it to get away. And what was so unnerving at first was it was this empty spot in the yard, and he was fixed on it. There was nothing there. And that's one of those things where you could be like, well, maybe there was something we just weren't seeing. Yeah, sure, there's bears in the area, whatever. Well, at 5 a.m., after he had not stopped barking the entire night, and we could not get him away from the window, we were both thinking, what are we doing staying at this house for this summer? This does not bode well. And it didn't. That was the first thing that took place there, was the dog. And that's one of those things for me, I think animals, right? And I've heard people talk about this on the podcast. Animals see stuff or sense stuff, know stuff that we just are not in tune with. Whatever was going on, that to me is one of those things. Like if an animal is freaking out at something, like watch out, because that's not good. They know what we don't when it comes to this kind of stuff. So that was the first night, and I don't remember how much later it was. It was a little while, but not that long. There was one evening, my wife and I, we were arguing about something, and she had the master bedroom, and we were in the master bathroom arguing. And I don't remember what about. She was right, whatever it was, but we were arguing, and all of a sudden, the sink comes on full blast. The sink of the bathroom, full blast. Okay. And then it shuts off, and the valves didn't turn. I will specify, it wasn't like the valves turned. They did not, but the water came on full blast. Oh, she's laughing now. She's here. She heard that part. Thumbs up, right?
So do I need to cut this part? Do we need to have Phil cut that part out so she can?
No, you can leave it. She's cracking up because it's true. She was right. She knows this is correct.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm going to say, so that she can put it on a keychain and say, here, have you saying she was right. She was right.
Screenshot it for me.
She was right.
We're gonna do. I'll print it and the thumbs up. No. You don't. She doesn't need reminded just the one time. She does. But so the sink came on full blast, and then shut off. And I'm immediately, this is probably why I don't remember the argument, because I'm immediately like, no, it's ghost. This is not normal, right? The sink can't do that. And no, and she's like, no, we're not done yet. Forget the sink. She had iron nerve. She could not have cared less about the sink. It was amazing. But I was all focused on the sink at that point. And then the thing about this, and I've seen this, I think, on Ghost Hunters, because those guys were plumbers, right? Am I
Yeah.
remembering?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I think I've seen where they've talked about certain valves can be forced on by water pressure, but they can't turn off. None of them can just shut off. And this was one of those where it's like, oh no, that valve was open and that valve shut off. And I've had to do a little plumbing, unfortunately, myself. And I would say after those experiences, yeah, I could believe the valve could come open, but it can't turn off. And this was so distinct. It wasn't like a drip. It was on full blast and then shut off. So that happened. And then that happened one other time later in the summer. But then the other things that took place, there would be a phantom smell in the house. And of all the things, this is kind of silly. It was pineapple. It smelled like pineapple, but like a spray or something almost. And
Okay.
of course, okay, yeah.
I just
Yeah,
said
like
like
it was
it's not like you had a pineapple, but it was like an artificial pineapple smell.
Right. Yeah, it smelled artificial. That's a good way of putting it. And that's not a very exotic in terms of the supernatural sort of a thing to smell. It's weird, right? Like what? Pineapple of all the things, I think like dead animal or dried roses sound more ghostly, but it was pineapple. And the thing about that, where again having that analytical mind, like you said, is like I know how scents work, right? Molecules disperse through air and they move further away from their source. But this was the kind of thing where you'd smell it really intensely right in your face and then it's gone. And then you'd walk across the room and it'd be over there. And there's another place I've had this kind of experience with a phantom smell. And it was another thing where, again, we were all four of us were smelling the pineapple on occasion. Sounds funny. We were smelling the pineapple, but
hey, whatever you want to do in your own time, hey,
you got to get kicks when you're in a little mountain town in Colorado that, but, and that was something that was ongoing and pretty frequent that we could never find a source. Cause that's always the thing with me with something like that, find the source. There was none, we couldn't find it. And then the other thing that would happen consistently would be this really faint, eerie singing. And this was truly freaky. Like of all the things I've experienced, this was unnerving. It was kind of amelodic and dissonant. And it always sounded very far away, but somehow close at the same time. And you could never pick up the exact melody. You could never pick up the exact sound of the music, but it was there. And it would kind of fade in and out. You would only hear at night. And me thinking that there would be an explanation with the woman downstairs. Oh, we're hearing the woman downstairs singing, and sure, it sounds creepy, but we're just not getting the whole song. Maybe she really is a Bella Soprano at the opera on weekends. I don't know, but so I figured I'm going to ask her. Hey. So I did the next day after the first time we heard this. This is weird, but do you happen to sing at night? And she's like, oh yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. I was like, oh, so that was you last night we were hearing. Immediately, without missing a beat. Oh no, that was the spirits. And I was like, okay, I didn't need that.
Did you follow? No, Kenna, did you follow up then with her and say, okay, that was the spirits. What else do the spirits do?
I didn't ask what else, but like after that point, she became very interested in trying to talk to me about all of this stuff, all this, the spiritual. And she was someone that had claimed to live past lives. She was someone that claimed that she was in the company of spirits all the time, and attached herself in conversation to whatever was going on in this house, and suggested at one point. It's funny, I've just remembered this just now. She suggested at one point that there was more activity in the house since we had moved in because it wasn't happy we were there, all this kind of thing, and the stuff that started to take place from there felt more sinister. One of the things I remember happened one night is I would stay up late and write. I've always been a little bit of a night owl, and so everyone else go to bed. I'd stay up and write, work on my writing. And there was one night, it was probably midnight, 1 o'clock, and I'm in a room that was diagonal from the other guy that was staying there. and the lights are all out, and I didn't really need much light. I just had the computer screen going, typing, and I hear his door open. It was very distinct, a really loud creak, slow creak. And then I see him, I think, walk out of there. And he's a tall dude. He had to be like 6'3", 6'4". And it's just dark shadow, but it was tall like he was. Walk out of that room and close the door. And then it walks out into the house. Well, he never comes back. And I'm thinking at first, what is he out doing this time of night, And the house is still dark, and I don't hear a car. I don't hear the door open or close or anything. And he doesn't come back. And after a little bit, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. After an hour, I'm like, no, this is not good. And then, after an hour and a half, I'm like, this is wrong. Something's wrong. Something's not right here. And so I sneak out into the house, and I'm looking to see if he's out in the house anywhere. He's not in the house anywhere. And there's no sign that he's left. The cars are all still there. And I come back. At this point, I'm like, I really hope for two reasons that he's not in the room. One, because I need to not have seen what I think I've just seen. Two, because if I wake him up opening his door, like I'm going to look like a psychotic, But so I crack his door open and peek my head in, and there he was asleep in bed. So whatever I saw, all right. And that's when only I experienced it. But I'm convinced that that's what I saw was this tall, dark, shadowy figure come out of this room and go off into the house.
Oh,
and
there
was another.
The fact that you stayed up for another hour and a half typing
to make sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's nerves of steel. I mean, it is, especially especially when you don't hear something going on, because I mean, I'd be sitting there like, okay, is he like hiding outside my door and he's gonna scare me or something? Like,
oh, that's good. I didn't think about that. I guess.
What's this guy do? Yeah, like what does this guy do? Is he
that's kind of
downstairs with the old lady in the basement or what?
Oh, yeah, maybe. Although he wasn't, he was in bed. Whatever it was, maybe. So, but that's kind of funny though. You say nerves of steel, and it's just one of those. Anytime I've experienced something like that where it was more isolated and I didn't have the comfort of everyone else being like, oh no, we saw it. It was weird. It's just kind of like, well, but what am I going to do? Right. Like,
yeah,
I guess I could run out of the house screaming or I could hide under the sheets, but what are you going to do? I don't know. There was another night, and this is something that happened more than once, where I heard the back door open and close very distinctly, like someone was coming in. To the point, it's funny, I forget which episode it was, but I heard someone else have a similar reaction on your podcast telling a ghost story where they heard a door to the house open and close. I think that guy came out with this gun. I had a big knife. I was there better not be anyone in the house. But like, you're right. I'm thinking someone's breaking into the house, and then I'm going to have to confront someone, and no, there's no one there. And the door's still locked and there's no trace of anybody and everyone's been asleep. That was something that went on. The stuff then that took place at this house that was witnessed by multiple people that was really strange, where at first it seemed like it could have a very simple explanation, but it gets more complicated. There was one evening we're all sitting out on the patio having dinner, and the back of this property adjoined to a little alley, and there was another couple of houses around, right? And all of a sudden, while we're eating, what seems like in the alley, but maybe right next to us, it was hard to place, is this laugh. Man, and if Pennywise the clown was cracking up right next to you, right? It was a creepy, freaky clown laugh, like something like that, right? It was the voice sounded deranged and distorted, and the laugh was so weird and almost like a child's laugh, but like an adult doing that at the same time. All of us heard this. It's just this maniacal clown giggle all of a sudden, and the dog is with us and he freaks out again. His hackles are up, and everybody's like, Weston, go check the alley. And I'm like, what the hell? Me go check the alley? What do you think? I'm not a Ghostbuster, guys. Come on, like, what is this? I'm not gonna go look. But I go look, and it's one of those situations where, yeah, there was lots of other houses around. There's the alley. Maybe someone nearby was messing with us all. It sounded awful weird if that's what it was. That happened twice in similar circumstances that summer.
Twice?
Where there was this, and it was the same voice, no source that was easy to identify. Everyone heard it. The dog freaked. Now, where there's a third time with this that I didn't exactly experience, but I'll tell you what my part in this was. There was an evening that the fourth person had a bunch of friends over for like a game night, okay? So we're all playing games, and I'm kind of, I'm not really mingling with everyone. I'm off kind of over in a corner, and then my wife and that other guy. Oh no, I'm sorry, the two other guys. They were standing talking, and then all of a sudden, the way I would describe what I like experienced, it was almost like there was like a disturbance in the air, right? Like I knew something had happened, but I couldn't tell what. It was like a puff through the air, and I like turned around, like, what the heck was that? And my wife is standing there freaked out, and this other dude is standing there just like freaked out. And I'm like, what happened? I immediately could tell something happened. I mean, I guess it's obvious you're looking at him, but I could tell that there was more to it. Um, and they told me after a minute, you remember that voice? And my wife had not heard that. So this was a guy that was saying the voice. But he was like, you remember that voice, that laugh? And I was like, yeah. He's like, we both just heard someone say hi to us in that same voice. And it was another, they both corroborated. Yeah, that's exactly what I heard. We heard this person saying hi. And there was no one there. There was absolutely no one around over there. Totally empty house. So
and how far away were you from them?
Oh, 3 feet, if that. I was almost right next to them.
And you didn't hear the voice say hello?
I didn't hear it, but I could tell, like I said, what I experienced was like something disturbing the air, like a big whoosh or something, but I didn't hear a whoosh. It was like feeling a shock wave more, I guess, is what I would describe. It was very strange.
That is crazy that they heard it and you did not, but you could tell something happened. And I just, as you were describing that clown-like child laughter,
Yeah,
all I
right.
could think about is one of our loyal listeners, old Marion down in Greenville, South Carolina. I know she's going to hear this and she's going to think, oh my God, the clowns, because she hates clowns.
Uh-oh.
I know
Yeah.
she hates clowns. So Marion, I'd get out from underneath the covers. It's the clowns are gone.
It was freaky. It was weird. That laugh was very unsettling.
That's
Not
insane.
to scare her more, but it was weird. And then where this kind of like ties again, and there's more stuff, I think, just because of like, the interest of people's privacy and things. There's some stuff I won't go terribly detailed into, other than to say, like I said, that this lady that lived in the basement was definitely like attaching herself to all this somehow. Like I'm not saying she was making it happen, but she was absolutely like aligning herself with whatever supernatural was taking place in the house. And and would always wanted to talk to me about it. And not like talk to me like, how would I put it? Like not like you and I are chatting about this stuff. Like she wanted to like put something on me is what I felt like. And where
or
that
like,
kind of came,
or like draw you into
Mhm.
It's almost like, do you feel like she was the one manifesting this stuff to happen?
I do. And I'll get to why. Here's the why. So I was an idiot and accepted something from her because she talked to me enough that she knew I was very interested in history and archaeology, and particularly like flint napping was something I talked to her about, right? Because I at one point I was going to go into archaeology and had been on a dig, and all this. Well, she gave me a bag of flint nappings, okay, and I was dumb and took it, and years later, it had to have been 4 or 5 years later, I'm sitting and I was working on a short story and I was reading a little bit about Hopi, Navajo or Dine, right, and Zuni mythology and beliefs. And I came across how you can curse someone in those cultures, and how what you do is you take flint nappings and you put a bone in the middle of all this, right? And of course there's more to it than that, but and that kind of fits with different things, around the globe. The idea of, I forget the names for them all, but the idea of that you can lay a curse on someone in these ways, right? Well, all of a sudden I remembered, oh my God, there's a bone in the middle of that bag that lady gave me years ago, and I immediately knew I had to take this and get rid of it. That was like quite freaky at that moment. And for me, I don't believe whatever that, if that's really what that was, that lady was trying to put a hex on me. My life did not have anything going on that I think that took place, right? Like, and I don't think that there was power in what she did to me or tried to do to me. But the point was, she still tried to do it. It seemed to be, right.
So you're telling me
like,
she was the worst witch
gotta
ever. She was the worst witch ever. That's what you're saying. And I didn't. I am not the one that said that. That was Weston Brown.
But I didn't take her ruby slippers, so I don't know what the deal was.
Jeez.
And not to make light, because again, it's real stuff. I'm not making fun, but to laugh a little because that's pretty freaky.
Holy smokes! So how did it end in that house? Do you guys just leave or did it escalate?
It didn't. That I think that's another one where what interests me at times with some of this is like where things stay in the realm of phenomenon and where things become like a really nice narrative for a movie. It just we got through the summer. There was that weirdness. There was the unpleasantness. There was definitely like a heaviness that was at that house that was gone once we left, but we just left and went on with life. And it wasn't until years later I remembered the bag of Flint nappings and got rid of it. And there was really no additional stuff that took place.
Holy smokes. And I know, because I know some of the other stories, I know we could go on forever with talking about some of these.
We could.
But I think what we'll do is we're going to stop here. And I think we will have you back for a Patreon episode and tell a couple more of your experiences and dig. I mean, because some of the stuff is just is kind of crazy. So, and
I think that'd be fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, I love. But I want you to tell everybody where they can find your stuff. Now, can people buy the stuff that I was seeing? Okay. And now, if somebody wants to buy a 6-foot giant salamander, they can commission that. That's not something
we can chat. Right. That's not a totally off the cuff, but right. You can buy stuff, anything that's not the film stuff that's on my Instagram account at weston.brownlee. That's all there. And then Tenacious Toys in New York City, they rep my stuff, and you can find all of it on there as well.
Now, and I just thought, do you have anything from a movie that you have been part of that is in your possession that if somebody saw it, they'd be like, instantly be like, oh my gosh, I know what movie that's from.
I do. I have almost all of the props from Dead for a Dollar. So I've got Willem Dafoe's props and his replica guns. I've got Christoph Waltz's props, Benjamin Bratt. I have almost all the props from that movie, everybody's.
Really?
And that's because things worked out in such a way that basically, like, I was able to say, the deal I'm making with you is you're going to rent all this from me, and I own it. And that's how it worked out.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Now, do you, is that something that you are going to use again in another movie maybe, or is it something that you're like, nah, I'm gonna put that away, that's kind of cool?
Those ones, no. Part of the deal I made with the producer, which was why they were like, yeah, all right, was like, nah, this is only ever these characters props from these actors from Walter Hill's movie. They'll never be in anything else.
And you know what I call that? I call that a wise investment, my friend.
I think
wise investment.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
I love it. So when does that? Do you know when that movie's coming out?
It's out. It's out.
Well, it's already out. I have not.
Yeah. It's a good one. It's fun. And it had a small theatrical run, and then it's available on Amazon, of course, or any of the other like major distributors where you can buy digitally. And somebody is streaming it now. I'm trying to remember if it's Hulu. I forget who's streaming it now. But it is one of the streaming services has it. Oh, it's funny. You'll see me in it too. I forgot to mention that with you talking about having been an extra. I wound up dealing poker in it because the guy that they had, who was the actual actor that was going to come in and deal, we were on the kind of tail end of COVID, and the guy that was going to do it allegedly was sick or had COVID. I don't know, but he was not going to be able to appear in it, and so they were asking around, well, who knows how to play poker? Who knows how to play poker? And they asked me if I did, and I was like, well, I'm not, I'm not some guy from Vegas. Like, I'm not going to flip the cards around and do tricks, but yeah, I know how to play, draw, and hold them correctly. Oh, that's great. Can you deal? Yeah, I know how to deal correctly. Oh, you're in the movie. You're in the movie. So I wound up dealing the card game that Willem Dafoe and Benjamin Bratt are in. So I'm right there with those guys. And then I dealt a second game that Dafoe is playing with another actor. And I just have to say, to date myself a little, getting to deal poker to the Green Goblin. Oh my God. Like that was phenomenal. That's one of those, on set, of course, you never bring that up, but now that, I could talk about, just gush a little as a fan. Oh, that was, I can't top that experience. It was amazing.
That's awesome. And for the record, I don't know what is better, the ghost stories or the stories of to be honest.
I'll take that, because I like that both can kind of run parallel,
Well, if somebody listened to this episode and is not entertained, I feel bad for you, because you got the best of about 3 different worlds in this one. So hey, Weston, thank you for reaching out to me and sharing some of the stuff, because this has just opened up a whole nother conversation that is and for me, it's a fantastic conversation, and I'm looking forward to having you back.
Thanks. Likewise, Shane.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you back on and hearing the rest of the stories and sharing them with our Patreon.
Oh, that sounds good. And I think to just plug that a little, if you don't mind, if you enjoyed this, if you like the Old West and you like mystery and intrigue and possible poisonings that are loosely alluded to in real history and correlate with the ghost stories and my own personal experiences, you will absolutely love that Patreon episode.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait. Well, we'll definitely let everybody know when we get it recorded and get it up there. So, but I appreciate you hanging out for a little bit, and I'm looking forward to the next time already.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Shane.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out. Ha 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 ha.